Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest polling on support for Scottish independence, which has caused the usual stir when they come out. For those who feel the results back up their views, they're delighted, they're showing it to everyone. For those whose views are counter to the poll, they dismiss it. Oh, absolute rubbish. In actual fact, there are things to take from this, things to ignore that most people don't necessarily appreciate. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. This is always going to make it lively in the comments. Couple of things to begin with. Usual full disclosure is that I am not in favour of Britain breaking up as a nation. I'm not in favour of Scottish independence. That being said, I've also said in the past, it's very, very obvious that the mandate is there for another referendum. But, you know, that being said, I am going to explain absolutely everything I say, so my own bias should be completely irrelevant to the process. If you think otherwise, feel free to point out my errors in the comments below. The second thing is just, you know, up to the headline figures before explaining what we can and can't read into them. So it shows that over the course of 2021, what was a majority of people supporting Scottish independence has turned into a small majority against it. Does that mean that a majority of people in Scotland are against independence now? No. Does it mean that at least a majority of Scottish voters are against it? Not that either, but not for the reasons some people imagine. You know, let's go over the usual response that people have to polls like this if they don't like the results. Though I have to say, if you're someone who spends time working out, how you can dismiss a poll you don't like, but immediately plaster a poll you do like all over social media, don't do that. Your credibility is leaking out of your pants quite badly. But let's go through the nonsense objection before looking at the real ones. First thing people say is, oh, it's a YouGov poll run by Tories, what do you expect? And indeed, there were many comments to that effect. It's not run by Tories. The chief executive is a Conservative supporter, but unlike many other polling companies, YouGov are very open about their methodology. You can see the results, and it's all very good reason for them to be open because it's all very sound, and that's why they are one of only two polling companies who consistently produce accurate polls when compared to election results. Like some people may imagine, oh, they just make the numbers up. They don't. If you don't spend any time actually looking at the raw data and looking at their methodology, okay. Most people won't understand their methodology. At the end of the day, most people are not mathematicians. The other one, by the way, that gets accurate election results is Ipsos Mori. So for those two, you need to pay attention. Now, I mean, if it was a fiddle poll, it would be evident in the detail, is what I'm trying to say. But there are some things to still consider. The first is what I always say about polls. They change when campaigns begin. And when I've talked last year about the same topic, when I've talked in the past about the Scottish independence and the feeling on either side and so on, I keep saying, you know, even when there was a majority in favour of independence, I keep saying there was no effective campaign against it. If you look at 2020, the SNP were building up support ahead of the Scottish elections and the yes vote in the polls will have been boosted. In addition, Boris Johnson's cack-handed handling of the pandemic was doing the unity of the UK no favours, and of his clumsy attempts to try and shore up support for the Union of Scotland by pretending to go on a camping holiday, setting fire to some bugger's field, when in actual fact he was living in an house. That didn't help either. But since those elections in Scotland, it's sort of gone the other way. The SNP are no longer in campaign mode. You know, they will be again when they decide the time is right to test their constitutional powers and push for that second referendum. But for now, they're in a sort of hibernation on the issue. On the other hand, the Conservatives have been pulling every trick they have, including the nonsense about Brexit helping our vaccine programme. So it's possible that in 2021 what's really happened is the Conservatives have put pressure on the issue that has swayed people the other way. The SNP haven't really been poking at it. It should come as no surprise that it sort of swung the other way. What I will always say is it's an issue that is definitely going to produce a close result one way or the other. Don't imagine when the referendum comes out it's going to be like a 70-30 split one way or the other. Of course it's not. You know, it's like 7 years ago. It's going to be a bit tight. And when it happens again, it may well be decided by the most effective campaign. That's what I'm saying. There's no real definite viewpoint amongst a large majority in Scotland. It's probably going to come down to who has the most effective campaign. Now, whether you consider that good or bad is another issue. But this is the thing with all polls. They don't tell you how people will vote in a future election, or in this case, a single issue referendum. They just tell you what people's views are now, and when it's within a 60-40 split, it can be turned right around during an actual campaign due to two main factors. First, once a vote is, like in poll at the moment, people are being asked about it and it's hypothetical. It's purely hypothetical. Once a vote is actually coming up, people start to think more deeply because they think, hang on a minute, there's now going to be a consequence to what I say. There's a consequence. That makes them think more deeply about the response, and that can change things. Secondly, the campaigns swing into action and the arguments, whether true or not, will enter people's minds. They may not have considered some of the arguments before. It may be because some of the arguments are nonsense. But that can change some people's minds. If campaigns didn't do a really good job of changing people's minds, you wouldn't be spending so much money on them. So if the poll is not a reflection of how people would vote, does that make them worthless? Well, that depends on what you want to do with it. If you want it as a predictor of how the vote will go, that when there is another referendum, yes, it's worthless. If you, when it was showing a majority for Scottish independence, were thinking, we should have a referendum right now, we'll definitely win it. I said at the time, you don't know that. And just because it swung the other way, you might think, let's wait for it to go back up. You don't know that. It could be won if it was to be had this year. It could have lost if it was to be had last year. We don't know because the campaigns weren't involved. If you want an indication of what people's views are right now, then that's what the poll shows. And this poll is a useful one because what you see from the polls, from some other pollsters that are absolute trash, YouGov are quite clear that they weight according to groups more likely to vote and they remove the don't knows because they're not going to be counted in the referendum anyway. Like with some other polling companies, in fact most of them, it's just an opinion poll. One reason they get the results so badly wrong, I see this before every election, 2019, it's particularly galling. You had people in Labour go, okay, this poll here says Labour are doing really well. It says, no, they are weighting young people equally to old people. But we know that when it comes to the election, the young people are not going to go and vote and the old people will. That's where they usually go wrong. They don't take account of the fact that this group of people don't really vote. Like the young. This is why so many polls skew towards groups and causes that younger people favour, but when it's put to the electoral test, it all goes tits up, basically. That being said, there is a potential issue with this poll that has nothing to do with their competence as pollsters, because they are actually pretty good. Because the poll takes account of the people who are likely to vote, which makes it more relevant, makes it more useful, you have to consider what happens if something changes. So, for example, if there's a second referendum, it doesn't automatically mean it will run along the same lines as the original in 2014. Everyone in Scotland over the age of 16, or most people anyway, took part in 2014, pretty much. This included EU and Commonwealth citizens. Now, in a second referendum, that might change. The electorate could be widened to include, say, Scots elsewhere in the UK or the rest of the world, or the rest of the world citizens living in Scotland, maybe. It could be narrowed to remove the rights of EU citizens to vote. It will essentially depend upon the negotiations when they happen between the governments in Holyrood and Westminster. You can't be certain the same rules will apply, even though you'd think precedence would be a powerful argument to keep it the same. But the UK government may well argue, well, we're not in the EU now. The EU citizens should not apply. Maybe the Scottish government could argue the toss, maybe not. We don't know. Obviously, the Scottish government, being pro-independence, will want the electorates to give them their best chance of success. That means widening it. Similarly, the Westminster government will want to stack the odds in their favour as well. No Conservative Prime Minister wants to be the one who goes down in history as having pissed away the Union. Well, not that Union anyway. Bear in mind, we still don't know where the balance of constitutional power will lie in this matter. It has yet to be tested in the courts. Last time, David Cameron agreed to the referendum and left the details to the Scottish government to sort out. That may not be the case when the SNP and the Greens eventually make their play. When that is, who knows? So that is an unknown. And obviously, if the nature of the electorate for the next referendum is different, then a poll like this is immediately invalid. Essentially, a poll like this, just like the Westminster voting intention polls that I sometimes discuss, is interesting. It's worth discussion. It's consistently close enough that you can't tell anything for certain about a future vote, the timing of which we do not know in either case, but there's also no point in mindlessly dismissing it just because you don't like the results and then plastering it everywhere as soon as you do. Remember, this poll says nothing about what the majority in Scotland want regarding nationality. It just says how a referendum would likely go if it were held tomorrow. But it's not being held tomorrow. It will never be held by surprise. There would be a significant period of time to focus people's minds and for campaigns to do their work. It's just a reminder that the result, whenever it is, will not be a foregone conclusion either way. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.